It's one of my favorite things about working with Jonathon is watching John work with the performers and the tools that he can give them, the tools that I can't give them. I don't have that understanding as an actor that he does. And so beautiful to see what comes out of them through him and their understanding of text and of context and of listening. And just to see the dimensions that have been added to them as performers has just been extraordinary.
So welcome to this next edition of Choreographer's Conversation, and on this occasion we have two people here, one choreographer, one theatre person, Crystal Pite and Jonathon Young. It's a great pleasure to have you here. So I want to start with both of you at the beginning, if you like, how you started in dance, how you started in theatre, just because it's something we do, because I think it's really interesting how people find a way in. And we'll start with you, Crystal. Okay. I know you started very early. In fact, I have a note here somewhere that the first piece you made a choreography to was called My Little Red Wagon when you were 3 years old. Is this true?
It's true.
And it should come here to Sadler's.
Yes.
We could do it here, and we could do it in this space here.
Time to remount it. Yes, round and round in my little red wagon, yes. I was about 3, and it's the first piece of choreography that I remember making.
And who is it on? Who were the...
I choreographed it on myself. I was a solo, and the reason I call it a piece of choreography is because I did use a piece of music. I had a costume that I wore, a very specific costume that I wore when I did it. I repeated the choreography. I skipped in a circle for the first 8 counts, and then I skipped in a counterclockwise circle for the second set of 8. And I had a choreography, and I could repeat it, and I performed it. And so when I think of choreography, yeah, those are the parameters. And
sure.
Not much has changed, really.
Did you tour it? Was it? Did you just stay in your front room?
We just stayed in the front room.
Okay, nice. And then you started putting on little shows in the afternoons somewhere as well, didn't you?
I mean, I started taking dance lessons. I did ballet and tap and jazz and musical theater, and I sang in the choir, and I played in the band, and I was in the drama program, and I was in all kinds of different performing arts and throughout my childhood. And by the time I got to high school, I was making choreography and choreographing the high school musical and putting on shows at home and all that stuff. Yeah,
it was in your blood then, really.
I guess so.
And where did it come from? Were your parents interested in theatre, or
they were interested and supportive, but they didn't come from theatre. No.
So where do you think it came from, this impulse?
I don't know. Where does anything come from?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just always done it. It's always just been part of who I am and what I do.
Yeah, amazing. So your father was not a full-time actor, but he had a community theatre group or something, is that right?
Yes, the Asparagus Theatre Company.
Asparagus Theatre?
Asparagus Theatre Company.
Interesting.
The small town where he started this community theatre was famous for its asparagus.
Was it?
Yeah, I kid you not. Cheese and asparagus.
Wow, okay.
We didn't live there. We lived, about a half an hour's drive. But he was a
Right.
teacher, and he taught in this very small farming town. Yeah.
And I think I read that you felt you didn't really have a choice. You knew you were going to be an actor because of that. Or...
Yeah, that certainly is where it began. Was he would drag my sister and I off to rehearsals on the weekends, so that my mom didn't have to deal with us, and we would sit there watching him rehearse Guys and Dolls or Fiddler on the Roof or other strange things. Him and a bunch of other teachers, and they started rehearsing in a school gym or a community hall, and then gradually they got their own hall, and it's still going. Yeah, cool. I auditioned for Round and Around My Little Red Wagon.
Did you?
But I didn't get cast in it. I mean, I thought that was going to be my big start, but
yeah, it's a pity about it. You feel sore about that still?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's motivated me, I think, fueled
Yes.
my ambition.
We'll get
I
onto
mean, the
that.
one thing about that piece is it didn't have any text. I would say that was its weakness, right?
Sure.
It was just around the wagon
really?
and back around the wagon.
There were the lyrics, though.
Oh, there were the lyrics from the song.
There were the lyrics
it
from the
was
song, so
pre-text.
that's what I was animating. I
Right.
was doing that. Subtext.
So we'll get back to all of that later. But
Thank
so then you started in Ballet BC, then went on to William Forsyth, then you really then had a whole career as a dancer. And I guess I would ask about the Forsyth experience mostly, because I think that everyone who's been there and come out the other side is influenced by it,
Of course.
enormously. Do you want to just say briefly how that was, why he was so influential?
Yeah, well, I was very, very lucky to have the chance to work there. I was there for 5 years, and I just had the most incredible colleagues. The 5 years felt like 15 years because every day was so rich, and I was learning so much so quickly. Bill was an amazing, and continues to be, such an inspiration. I think for me, one of the main things I learned was probably improvisation. Improvisation was what drew me there to begin with, and improvisation was like my pathway through those 5 years, I think. And it's the thing, I think, the most important thing that I've brought with me out of that time is using improvisation as a generative tool. And it has a presence in our creative process. It also has a presence in our, our performing and in our staged works. So I'm really grateful for all of that learning. And I think in Bill there was a kind of, a genius obviously, but a kind of recklessness that I really loved. It was so different from the way that I am. He's willing to, just make a mess and throw things away, and yet it had this intense rigor and intelligence. So it was a very interesting tension between those things, and I've held those as an ideal.
Yeah.
I think I do the rigor part quite well in what I do. The recklessness is still something I'm trying to work on.
Yeah.
But in him, I felt like those things were in a beautiful tension. It was very motivating.
Okay, he's also a showman, isn't he? And I can see
Yeah.
that in your work. I mean, there's fun as well in it as well.
Yeah.
It's quite.
Yeah, Bill always puts on a good show.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Which is saying something.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Do you have a mentor of that kind? Was there a big influence in your career?
Not in the same way, no. I mean, I started Electric Company Theatre the year we got out of theatre school. It was with 4 or 3 other classmates. So we all graduated more or less together, and we just started on that right away with no money, no funding, and just started figuring out how to make shows. And I don't have any training as a writer, and it was just by doing.
Yeah.
And figuring out what we wanted to do and what we wanted to bring to the stage, and ended up making shows that had physicality embedded into the narrative, partly because 2 of us really didn't know how to write. So if we wanted to sort of generate anything for the show, it had to be an image, a physical image, as opposed to a piece of text. And that's sort of, I think, how I found my way a bit into physical performing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was in Vancouver, and the company's still going. I don't live there anymore, but still able to create work there.
Yeah. Right. So that you knew of each other in that town, Vancouver, and you saw each other's work, and is that right?
When Crystal came back from Frankfurt.
Oh, yeah,
It was
sure.
soon after that, I
Yeah.
think we were introduced, yeah.
And you saw him performing, but then you approached Crystal.
By
in
that
terms of
point,
first.
Electric Company had hired Crystal for 2 projects.
Yeah.
So we had worked together on a film that Electric Company
Uh-huh.
made, and then a stage play.
Okay.
So we had worked together as actor and choreographer,
Ah, right. Okay. I didn't know that.
and become friends.
Yes.
So that was many years before
Yeah.
I approached Crystal about Betroffenheit.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that approach? Why? What?
Well, I became unexpectedly the artistic director of Electric Company. It started as a collective, and then, after about 10 years, we just became exhausted with making collective decisions, and then we kind of went through this rotating cycle of who would lead the company, but I said I would never do it. But then if I didn't, that was it for the company. So I decided I would step up and take the helm. So I had to make a show. And I think it was around that exact same time I saw the recording of Frontier and Parade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was almost like those events sort of coincided.
Mm-hmm.
And
Works of Crystal.
yeah, but I saw
Yeah.
the broadcast version in Toronto.
Of Netherlands Dance Theatre.
Oh, yeah.
And at that point, I also had done a bunch of writing on what would become Betroffenheit. And I mean, maybe we had even spoke about it slightly before that. But I just had to make a show, and I thought, well, maybe this material, if I'm going to perform in it, it will need to be very physical, and I wanted to make something, and I realized that was sort of the time. I think I said, I better do this before I get too old. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was a particular incident in your life, a real life. How did you feel when you heard what the subject matter was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, fascinated and honored and curious and scared and willing, energized by the idea of working with Jonathon on it. And I mean, I think when you originally approached me about it, I said no because it was in direct conflict with the Kid Pivot show. I had to make a Kid Pivot show. Similarly, I got to make a new show, and I'm supposed to make it at the same time. And then we realized, if we make both of those shows the same show, so it became a co-production, and our companies worked together to produce it.
Yeah.
And then we went. And I one of the things I suggest, I mean, I always had wanted to choreograph something for Jonathon. He's an incredible mover. And I had worked with him as an actor, and I'd seen what he could do physically, and I was always interested in doing something more. But I also thought that I could probably do a better job if I brought in more dancers, that I could, give the best of myself if I had.
I think I pitched it as a solo show, didn't I? Maybe.
I think so, yeah.
It's hard to remember now.
Yeah.
We've told this story now so many times, but it always changes
It's
slightly.
come out different each time. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think you did pitch it as a solo show, and I thought I could probably do a better job if I had more humans in the mix. So we brought 5 other performers into the piece, and we started building it. First on paper, at the table, and then we did some tests with dancers, and
and the design team got involved quite early too.
Yeah.
But unlike Revisor and Assembly Hall, we started rehearsals without a script. We had a set. But I didn't know who I was in the play. We didn't know who anyone was.
Yeah.
We just had a few text fragments. And so it was, in terms of the process, it was much more devised in the room.
Right.
And it was after that we started, using longer scripts, and therefore the necessity came that those had to be more or less finished by the time we started.
Yeah.
And one of the things that gave us flexibility in that process was that we knew that all of the speaking in the show would be done by Jonathon, and some of it was going to be live, and some of it would be pre-recorded.
Yeah.
And so that gave us flexibility. Like sometimes John would just go upstairs and just quickly record something on GarageBand or whatever, and then bring it down. We'd instantly put it into motion in the room. So we had a lot of possibility.
A lot of bad. We were listening to a lot of bad writing in the room.
Yeah.
Raw.
Good writing, terrible
Raw.
recordings. Yeah.
Well, maybe bad writing too, a bit of both. But stuff that was just coming up on the day, fresh.
So it was a really, really quick feedback loop, which is different from what we've been doing more recently, where we have more actors involved, and it's a script that has to be delivered, more in advance of our process. And
But it was the first time you used this idea of setting movement to text in that way?
In that way, yes. In that way, definitely.
You got the designers involved in the very beginning. How did you learn how to work together collaboratively? Was it an easy sort of? Did it just work straight away? Was it tricky, or did you have to try understand each other?
Yeah, I mean, we learned by doing. I mean, we learned just by speaking. I mean, it was scary, to be honest. Partly because of the content, and partly just because although we had a relationship as friends, we were meeting each other as artists and developing a language. So I think it was, tentative at times, but we just kept, it was just kept the exchange going. And I think that was part of it was a great idea to bring in the rest of the team fairly early on too, because then that conversation grew bigger and expanded, and
Yeah.
we didn't feel like we were alone in it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it really, that whole creation period was just one step forward
Yeah.
into the terrain,
Yeah.
you know, and figuring out how we were going to talk about that content and where it was going to be, and who the characters were and how they fit together. And I mean, then bringing the dancers was a whole other layer, because of course I'd never met them, but you guys had a real history together.
Yeah, yeah. And you had to really get up to performance level in that show as well, didn't you?
Yeah, it took a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a major piece of work. I mean, you know, everyone knows it's a masterpiece, and so it made a big impression. So then, after that, you felt like, yes, we should continue with this. You wanted
Yes.
to just explore it,
Yeah.
keep exploring this. So the next subject, Revisor, is really about how bureaucracy, how systems go wrong, basically, and that's the sort of theme in your, a little bit, not Betroffenheit, but the rest is about when things kind of go slightly ajar.
Yeah, and I think Betroffenheit too, there was certainly, the protagonist seemed to be caught in an image language system that was dysfunctional.
Yes.
And,
yeah,
trying to bring those two worlds together. And
yeah. So why did you choose that as a subject, the play itself? What was the motivation?
The government inspector.
Yeah.
We had started talking about farce as a genre of comedy that was extreme and very physical, and that, you know, usually was about bad human behavior. I mean, I guess most comedy is, but especially a farce is about people behaving badly. It's often about violence, and yet there's humor in there. And there's a show within the show in Betroffenheit, so we had started, you know, we had thought maybe there was this sort of, I guess that's where we started talking about farce, right?
Yeah. It was something that didn't make it into Betroffenheit, but we kind of had it in our back pocket for the next show. And
Right.
we were
Really
interested in it.
extreme comedy.
Extreme comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We wanted to do something funny, and we wanted to do something political.
Yeah.
And then Jonathon came up with the idea of adapting the Inspector General, or the government inspector,
Yeah.
by Nikolai Gogol. And at first I thought it was just nuts as an idea. I just thought that was just crazy. And
Neither of us were familiar with the play.
Yeah, I still don't
Right.
really know the play
No.
very well.
No.
Not the way that you do.
So it was an interesting approach toward that content. It was more about somehow the structure of the piece looked at from a certain angle spoke to us.
Yeah.
There was something about an imposter embedded inside the structure of a farce. Right away, that I think piqued our imagination. That was all we needed to say. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, put it on, you know, make it public. And then it was meeting the play firsthand and really trying to get into that content and figure out what to do with it and how to reduce it and how to make it speak in a way that we wanted to. But it was looking at that drama as like a matrix or a structure that we thought of as maybe a corrupt structure or a dated, outmoded structure that needed to be changed. I think that was maybe our approach toward it. So the content was almost secondary.
Yeah.
We were also noticing that the play doesn't have any redeemable characters in it.
Yeah.
And we thought maybe part of our journey through the play could be a search
Yeah.
Yeah.
for redemption, to
Yeah.
see if we could find that inside it. We could kind of pry it apart and find out what it was made of, or even seek something that could be redeemed.
Yeah.
And
that would trigger some sort of change.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Knowing full well too that we wanted the play to end the way it ended, you know, so that we were looking for that. I guess wanting to stage that attempt to inspect something from within, to change something from within, and the difficulty of that, which I guess was a motif in Betroffenheit too, in some ways.
Yeah. But the kind of thing I see happening in the work, it starts in a very funny way, the Revisor. So does this assembly room. But then gradually it gets darker and darker and darker and more complex until it's almost overwhelmingly complex. You know, can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, is that a conscious decision to deconstruct? It's the same with Betroffenheit. It becomes more and more abstracted as the piece goes on.
Yeah, and I would say maybe That makes more sense to me than more and more complex. I don't find, I mean, I've seen the show a few times, but I don't feel like we're heading into complexity in this piece. I do think that we're heading into a terrain which is abstracted or impressionistic, and you know, we've taken our audience from something which is character-driven and text-driven and real into terrain which is the opposite of those things. But it doesn't feel like it's complex, it doesn't feel like the piece heads into complexity. But maybe that's...
Yeah, I guess it is abstract. It gets more abstract.
Yeah.
So it's harder to read.
And those narrative expectations have been sort of jettisoned.
Yeah.
In a way, the narrative has taken us into a terrain where it no longer has a foothold.
Yeah.
And certainly in Revisor, that was a big part of how narrative and dance work together. Yeah.
Yeah. But is that planned, or is it just something that develops as a work? I mean, basically, do you start from the beginning and then get to the end? How does it work in the sense? Is it something that does the work just continue and then it somehow through the creative period turns into what it is by the end?
I wouldn't say it starts at the beginning and heads directly toward the end, if only it did, though.
Right?
We know this is the beginning.
Yeah.
I think we're coming at it from all different angles.
Yeah.
Knowing full well that the show has two sides to itself. It has language and it has physicality, and those things have to be in some kind of dramatic tension. They need each other, and they also are vying for, I don't know, control or something.
I think we're also interested in worlds that, you know, the sort of slippage between two worlds, a world that is familiar and, like you said, character-driven and text-driven, and it feels like people we recognize and language we recognize. And then through various different portals or different possibilities within the work, we go to a place that's more like a labyrinth or is more mythic or is more destabilized and volatile, and I think that being able to slip back and forth between those states is something we're interested in. We've always loved being able to quickly jump back and forth between those worlds. And in this piece in particular, because we wanted to get lost in it. We wanted our characters to get lost in this other world. We wanted to get lost in it. That was, I don't know, was it even more labyrinthine than some of the other things we've done? I felt it was.
I mean, I think for a while too, because we had decided, even before we knew really what the play was, or what content, where these characters were going to go, we had decided on this community hall as our setting.
Yeah.
That was almost like an artistic limitation, also something that we just loved. But before we knew what they were doing in there, what they were going to be talking about, we decided that's where it's set. And for a while, we thought, well, this hall probably has multiple different groups inside of it. So for a while, we were thinking that the show would sort of stack up in episodes that maybe were, you know, only connected via this hall. That it would be, you know, I think for a while we were
like
sort
a
of
multi-purpose hall where you have a wedding, and then you have a bar mitzvah, and then you have a bake sale, and a cheerleader practice, and we had all these ideas about these different groups that would come in and how the hall would experience that as.
And some of them would be text-driven, and some of them would be physical, and some of them would just be a moment. And some of them would be the empty hall at night with one little event, you know.
That sounds like a good show.
It does,
doesn't
it?
Yeah, should have done that.
We should have done it.
We followed that idea for a while.
But then the benevolent and protective order took over.
Yeah, how did that happen? I read in the program, there's a piece you've written about the beginnings. By the end of it, I still didn't understand.
No.
There were various references to the text and stuff, but I had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't quite understand, but maybe you can explain now.
Yeah, those program notes certainly didn't go out of their way to explain the show.
No.
And maybe that's where this idea of complexity comes in. I mean, we decided to write that to sort of say, well, here's how this hall came into being, and it was kind of like a pathway through a forest to get there.
Yeah,
and when it comes time to somehow articulate what that journey is, you know, going back through all this stuff, you just see, wow, what a route we've taken, and yet, you know, some of those pieces are still in there.
Yeah, it's true. In fact, the hall is just there with the forest, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the background, always. It's
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
Which is certainly how I imagine where the hall is in my mind. You know, it's obviously on the edge
Yes.
of this dense forest.
You still haven't explained, though, how you got to this place. The
Well,
bit I got was
yeah.
like this sense of where you used to go to pageants and, you know, that you had that sense of
Yeah.
those occasions that happened when you were young, which, you know, you felt were like important passages of time, you know,
Sure.
rites of passage, rather. So it was,
Well, we loved the setting of the community hall. We felt it was really potent for us. And we
There
had
was a
lot of
felt
memories.
connection
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I grew up making little shows on those little stages, and it feels like really fertile territory to be working in. So already, it came. The hall itself just came with its own history and its own
immediately
magic.
created the ordinary world.
Yeah.
That, you know, that then we would somehow cross the threshold into the special world, but right out of the gate we had that.
yeah.
And when we thought of having an annual general meeting with a board of directors, we wanted that, but then we had to figure out what they were gathered around. Like, what was it that they loved? We didn't want them to be zealots. We didn't want them to be some kind of cult or sort of religious order or anything. We wanted them to gather around something that they loved. We were inspired by a bunch of amateurs, the film about the Britain's oldest filmmaking club. I don't know if
Yes.
anybody
By
here has
Kim
seen
Hopkins.
that. Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned doing that.
Yeah, and so that was actually a really good marker for us because there was a group of people that was gathered around
Yes,
something that they loved, that was creative, that was about storytelling,
yeah,
and we felt a connection to that. And that they were amateurs was also exciting for us. And thinking about what brings people together. And then we needed a story. We needed the thing for them to gather around.
yes.
And that's how we settled on the ancient tale.
And a way of them to be physically engaged with that narrative. I think that was a question that we were, you know, stewing on for a while. Is like, what is physically driving them in this relationship to this content?
Yeah, okay.
And perhaps that's how we got into this idea of reenactment, which means you are literally you're physically bringing that story to life.
Yeah,
As soon as we settled on reenactment, then a whole world opened up.
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah.
It did.
Right.
Yeah.
A word of armour. And,
yeah. So.
did
yeah.
you go round to any of the actual societies? Did you ever engage with
I did
them?
join one.
You
yes.
joined one?
Yes, I joined.
Did you do any reenactment?
No.
Oh,
No.
you just went to the meeting?
Yes, that's. I mean, I joined because I could then get access to the board meetings minutes, and watch their meetings.
Really?
Yeah.
How were
I
those?
just had to shell out the.
So is it a good reflection in the play from what you read?
Or watched. Yeah, I
watched.
watched sort of Zoom recordings of these board meetings. Yeah, it was. I mean, it got me into the rhythm of that conversation. I mean, I run the Electric Company Theatre, and you run Kid Pivot, so we
Yeah.
have both sat on, and I'm sure you have too.
One or
been
two.
at a lot of
recognise-
board
Everyone
meetings.
recognises
Yeah,
these
and the
meetings,
Roberts
yeah.
Rules of Order, which is, you know, a structure for board members to come to consensus and to work their way through conflict. And there was something just that really attracted us, that right away there was a structure of speech that was designed to get people toward a common goal. And we thought, well, that's kind of, there's a labyrinth right there that's going to be a fun, again, matrix or a structure to explore content. Yeah.
So when we're like in the meeting with this board of directors in their annual general meeting, you get this sense of these kind of small scale grievances and these sort of politics within the
Yeah.
meeting, and even
Yeah.
amongst like-minded people, there is this tension and a certain amount of drama,
Yeah.
and yet there's Robert's rules, you know, trying to create fairness, trying to give everybody a chance to speak, and
There's
something.
the system.
Yeah.
Right,
There's
the
the system,
system
but
and
then-
its malfunctions. Or
Yeah, and
malfunctions,
it's something
yeah.
very, very beautiful about that. I find it quite touching, Robert's rules, because it makes me think about how humans we build these structures in earnest to try to hold
Yes.
conversations in fairness,
Sure.
and then you zoom out and you start to think about democracy, and you start to think about how these things are built in earnest to hold us,
Yes.
and how they do fail
But
because
yeah.
be-
Because we're
because
human.
we're human.
Yeah.
And yet there's something quite beautiful about
It's
the attempt.
all the thought that went into making that,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that structure
sure.
and the
Yeah.
need for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have the Roberts rules here, do we? I don't think we do.
No?
I'm just trying to think.
You've got to try them.
We have the rules, but we don't call them anything. I don't
Okay.
think, but,
Robert's
it's
Rules
interesting.
of Order.
Who is Robert? Was he?
Don't know.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Probably
So-
he was the chairman of some board.
He probably
Yeah,
was.
that's-
But
He
it's
probably
like,
was.
I move that we, call
Yeah.
the assembly to order. I so move, I second
Yeah.
that. We
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
motion
Table the
by and
motion
in the,
and-
yeah.
Yes, yeah, we have all that. We just
Yeah,
don't.
we don't call them
something.
Roberts,
Yeah.
okay.
But then, obviously, it gave you the chance to really play with this idea of the reenactment, the medieval
Right.
costuming, and which is great fun to play with.
So fun. So fun. I love it so much. It's been so joyful working with that aspect of things.
Yeah.
When our medieval reenactors are in full reenactment mode, it's a great ride. It was
Yes.
fun to make, and it's fun to watch, and it's fun to do, and yeah.
And then right away that world started to open up potentials for light and darkness.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
the fun of all that, and yet when you think, well, really this is reenacting, knights often, battling, and knights are mercenaries, and the world was pretty hard back in medieval times. But in a reenactment, there's a lightness, there's a game, there's a sense of belonging, a sense of play, and
Yeah.
we were interested in that attempt toward authenticity, to get as close as you can toward the real thing, knowing that you'll never really quite reach it, which is, of course, what we do in the theater.
Yeah.
So it felt like there was just a bunch of different references there that we could play with, I think.
And then just the idea of reenactment itself as a theme, as a motif through the piece, and being able to ride that line for the audience. What is, so that we're in a state of wondering, what
Yeah.
is reenactment and what is real?
Yes. Yes. And it flicks between the two all
yeah.
the time. Yeah. In that,
Yeah.
It wasn't
And
the
yes,
fir-
Percival, the Grail Quest by Chrétien de Troyes was sort of the story that we zoned in on.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As our sort of, I guess, touchstone for the story that we created at the center of this order. That was.
Yeah. It wasn't the first piece you made about a meeting, though, was it? The statement was also based on that. And
Yeah.
I'd kind of forgotten about that one. That was also a collaboration. But that was fantastic. And particularly for our times, where lots of people are trying to cover something up all the time, and doing it badly,
Yeah.
by trying to cover it up, making it more
Yeah, and I
exploding.
think in that piece there is this event which is so massive, it's so gigantic, and it's so distant. It's happening somewhere else.
Yeah.
And these 4 people in this tiny little room have to somehow use speech to explain it away or to clear it up or something. But
Yeah.
there was that kind of tension, which again is in this piece. There's the text world of this assembly, and then there is the ancient story that they are trying to bring to life and to bring into the present. So there's a similar tension, I think.
Yeah. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the mechanics of, particularly not Betroffenheit so much, but when you do have to have actors
Right.
who have, because they're the stars that aren't here,
Right.
basically.
You're so right.
They're back
yeah.
in Vancouver or wherever, but they're so much part of the show. Just tell us how that works, because you basically have to have written those scripts. I mean, it's not like you're in the room in the Betroffenheit where you can quickly change things.
No.
So once that's set, it's pretty, like, that's it.
It's difficult to make a change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, expensive and
Yes.
time consuming. And
So you spend a lot of time on that, I guess, making sure that
Well, the actual
feels right.
recording sessions are just a matter of days. They go,
Oh, really?
they're quick, but it's it's trying to prepare the script
Yeah.
and to be settled on it enough that we can record it with those voice actors, because then that's it. It's pretty fixed, and
Yeah.
we built into our process a second recording session if we needed it.
Right.
And also this time around, we had a month-long workshop where we'd done rough recordings of the material that I'd written. So we at least had that month to explore the text a little bit, and some of it which never made it into the show, knowing that this was just a first draft of the recordings. With Revisor, we went into the creation process we had done our recording, and
Yeah.
that was kind of it. So at least we had that workshop to test some of the text.
I mean,
Yeah.
so what we start with, basically, if people don't know, we have almost like a radio play version of the script.
Yeah.
So we have in this case, we had 8 voice actors record all of the text, and then that's what we work to as part of our sound score, as part of it's a script, but it's also our music.
Yeah.
And the performers, the dancers, each embody a voice, so they kind of wear a character's voice. And they learn their lines, and not just their lines, but all of the breathing in and all the breathing out, and the little isms and details.
And then all the thinking and the motivation and who
Yeah.
they are and why they say what they say, and there's all that. There's that layer as well.
Yeah, so it's like they physically lip sync, like not just with their face, but with their whole bodies. They sync to the text.
There's something about that which gives more power somehow, because they're not like an actor is speaking it already speaking, but if you're actually having to physically, if you wipe out that bit and you're only physically trying to mimic it, then you can concentrate on that. It gives it, it's expanding it, I guess, the words in an incredible way, which is just fantastic.
Well, we love doing it, and it's helping us to, it's caused us to move in ways that we wouldn't be moving in otherwise, which I really love. I feel like it's really affected the choreography, it's affected the way we move, and it's brought a layer of complexity and detail that I'm really enjoying a lot. And yeah, I think we also try to stretch. Sometimes there's a particular gesture or posture that would be normally associated with a little phrase of speech. You would see that, but then we're trying to stretch that so that we can be more extreme in the body, but still hear what's being said. And we're always trying to push and stretch how far we can go in the physicality before the audience splits into seeing and hearing. And it helps, I think, sometimes when we repeat scenes later in the show, when we go into more abstract or deconstructed territory, we kind of hear fragments of the old meeting, and we can hear it again, and we understand the context. We remember what was happening before, and it gives meaning to the physicality that we're seeing in that more abstract territory. I feel like the text is almost like giving the audience the keys to the car in a way, and then they can just be in there, they can just drive with us.
Yeah, sure.
And see the more physical sections in a different way.
And in the process, are you always there? Or do you say, oh no, you can get on and do the movement now, Crystal?
I'm pretty much always lurking around. Once we get into the room, there's a lot of overlap in terms of our roles, right? We talk about physical images and the order of scenes, especially with this one. There were a bunch of episodes of the meeting, but there was a bit of play as to which one would follow. So we talked about transitions from one to the next, and the ending didn't arrive until quite late. The final monologue.
The ending, though, physically was one of the first things we made.
That's right.
So that was kind of interesting.
So we knew physically where it was going.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I talked to the dancers about acting and trying to figure out for myself. I've done this, and I know how unnatural it is to kind of inherit a recording that then you have to seem as if you are generating all those words and thinking them beforehand and listening. But in fact, there's nothing coming out. So it's a very external way to meet a character.
Yeah, sure.
It's one of my favorite things about working with Jonathon is watching John work with the performers and the tools that he can give them, the tools that I can't give them. I don't have that understanding as an actor that he does. And so beautiful to see what comes out of them through him and their understanding of text and of context and of listening, and just to see the dimensions that have been added to them as performers has just been extraordinary.
Well, it certainly works as a collaborative team. Yes. And you're going to continue, I hear. So already thinking of, we don't know what it is, but
yeah, we don't know what it is. Something. And
you said something very nice while we were waiting, that you just being in the world, you sort of just pick up things and you say, well, that's definitely got to be in the next piece.
Yeah.
That's a very nice way of thinking. So you're experiencing the world, and then gradually that gets synthesized into something we see.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to engage with the world, is to see potential in things or in phrases or in places that then can be repurposed or explored. Especially if you've forgotten that, very ordinary things that we've sort of forgotten that they have an actual, potency or potential to them. It's a nice way to be in the world.
Yeah, and when you know that you have a show to make up ahead, there's something that's always open in
Yeah.
you. And I'm sure that's true for all artists of all different disciplines. Like there's something open in you that sees and hears differently. Because you're always on a search, you're seeking.
And
you're
that
tuned
sort
in
of
to-
speaks back to the program notes about that list of sort of waymarkers that we had made a list of along the way.
Yeah. But I guess there's something about two people going through that, isn't there? So
Yeah.
often as one author thinking that, but you sort of share this approach to the making.
Yeah, thank God, thank
yeah.
goodness.
It's a real relief.
It's
yeah.
such a relief to share this with John. I mean, I do make work all by myself sometimes too. I mean,
Yes, I know, we know,
never make
yes.
work all by myself. I'm always working with a big
Yes.
team of people.
Except round and round the red dragon.
Yes, that's right.
That's true.
Which we won't mention again.
No,
you know.
that's 3 now. Is it?
That's right.
Yeah.
But in terms of co-creating something, it's really amazing working
Yeah.
together and to be able to, yeah,
Well, it's rare, I guess, to come across someone that it can work that way.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
keep doing that because we want more. And thank you so much for sharing all those thoughts,
Thank you
complex
too.
thoughts, but really wonderful. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.